Today, I am joined by Paule, who's DVP for Vertical Business Owner Data Centers at dormakaba. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about data center security. And my first question for you is, when we talk about data center security in itself, the focus is often on cyber risk. But from your perspective, where does physical security sit in the overall resilience of a facility?
I think it's very important, but before I just relate the two, I'd like to look at what resilience means, because I remember, I think it was 3-4 years ago when I heard the word, and I really was interested in what is the meaning of resilience. And I think very important, especially if we look at the data center industry, it's about high availability, which is key topic of the industry. Definitely, it's about redundancy. Everyone expects that, but it's also about disaster recovery. And I think that's very important because it's not just a topic where we need to secure ourselves. We also need to think about what happens, what has to happen if something, if you are attacked, and what is the process after the attack? How fast can we get back in operation mode? And I think that's very important, and that's really the end of the whole story we need to look at. And if we compare the physical security and the cyber security, obviously I think it's needs to be both balanced on the same level. And but there are some differences. I mean, cybersecurity, if you think about disaster recovery again, it's probably a little bit easier to get back in operation mode because it has to do with connectivity, with software. But if you think about a building, recovery is a totally different topic, and it is physical, and I think there are a lot of things you need to think about, and but I think it needs to be balanced in the best possible way.
Yeah, definitely. And so when we're talking about the physical security, starting at the perimeter, what will you say were the most common risks that organizations underestimate at that first point of entry?
There's a risk to underestimate that. I wouldn't say that this is not managed well by the most couple in the industry. But what I believe is very important, that, I mean, if you get to a data center at the perimeter, it's if you look at the individual, it's more or less the start of a people flow process, and you're far away from the point where you think about it's really secure now. It's the white space of a data center. You have all the racks here. Here, this is the heart of the data center, and you're far away from that. But if you think about the overall process, I think this is the point where everything starts. And if you underestimate some of your processes, your steps behind your process, then it's critical, even that you're physically far away from any PC, any rack in that moment.
Mm. And so where do organizations most often get their transition from perimeter to facility access wrong?
I think it's really, you get to a data center, you obviously usually have an invite, you have a QR code to access the car park, and you get through the first turnstile, and then obviously I think it's very relevant that you start a standardized process in the best possible way, system based. Everything's coordinated, no mistakes from either from the managers of the data center or from the individual who wants to get into the data center, whoever they are. And I think this is a very important step to get really the security process started. And we really believe that this first step with the identification, the verification of the individual, and not only the visitor. I think sometimes it's called visitor administration. At the end of the day, everyone is every day a visitor for the data center. You need to handle them in the same way every day. And the risk is also, if you, I mean, everyone knows that you get to a place where you are known. And this is a risk because everyone believes, okay, this is Rebecca, and we know her, and we can trust her, and this is a emotional situation. Yeah, everyone knows. But if it comes to data center, you need to be restrict. You need to really do everything every time the same with the same people you maybe see every day, and that's, I think that's the core of security, and it's a security process as well.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, because as you say, as we might know each other over time, but data centers are very different. You have to treat everyone the same. And I'm wondering, inside the facility, how do you manage that balance between making sure it's accessible to the people that have the right to be there, but also having that level of control in high traffic areas?
I think it's very important that everyone understands the process in the sense, and it really has to be a process which everyone is willing to support. Because I think you can easily try to get away from a process which is defined by just getting off the process, doing something manually, not system-based anymore, not following a certain protocol. And I think that's obviously something you'd like to get into the building. You have a reason why you'd like to get into the building. You'd like to get into the building as fast as possible. But on the other hand, you need to accept that the security procedures will be every time the same. And it's probably boring for everyone, but it has to be that way, in order to be secure.
How important is it to align access strictly to just the roles and the responsibilities as you move deeper into the data center?
A data center is structured in different layers, and the more you get towards the heart of the data center, which is the white space, but at the same time, we shouldn't underestimate the gray space, the so-called gray space as well. Yeah, people. It's like in traffic. Yeah, the more you get to the middle, the more options are relevant for certain people with a different role. So there's maybe a customer who wants to get to the rack. There's maybe a technician which is close to the rack but has to take the right direction to get into the room where you have the cooling or the heating or the air conditioning. And I think it gets more and more complex the more you get to the middle of a data center, but it gets also more and more relevant the more you get to the core of the data center. So the complexity in that sense grows. And obviously, if complexity has to be handled and managed, then you need a very defined and specified process and systems. They work in that sense.
As we reach the most critical areas, say the white space, as you just mentioned, what do you think separates really good security from truly robust security?
It's an interesting question, to be honest. And as I understand the question, I think it's about accuracy, verification, and control. These are the basics. And I would say good security keeps doors locked. Yeah. And robust security ensures every access event is managed, monitored, and tied to a verified identity. So I think on one hand, make sure everything's locked. No one can get in there who is not supposed to be in there. But I think the real task is to manage all the use cases, all the different people, all the different roles, all the complexity I mentioned. And I think this is really then a robust security system, I would call it.
And then leaning a little bit more on like human behavior, from your experience, how much of the risk in data centers comes down to human behavior rather than the technology gaps?
A significant portion comes from human beings. And I think this is also really the challenge for people who are running a data center. And I've seen a lot of interviews throughout the last months about that, because I think you can, if you think about a purely system-based security system, you can handle everything. So this is also the idea of some of the hyperscalers. They'd like to have dark data center without any human being in there anymore, because then they could obviously coordinate everything system-based. But as soon as you have people, and I really mean people, any kind of role, any kind of background, any kind of, let's say, reason for being in a data center, you obviously need to understand that you have not just maybe not the most efficient way, because human beings behave like human beings also in a data center, but on the other hand, human beings are also a kind of risk. And there are obviously two different risk. The one is making mistakes and therefore being a risk for the security of a data center, and the other ones are they obviously a risk on purpose, and then they try to manipulate, steal, or do any harm to the data center itself. And I think this is something you cannot manage 100%. And so I really believe that this is the critical piece of running a data center.
Mm. And going off of that, we're talking about security and the measures needed to make sure it is robust. But how important is it to build that from the outset, so into the design phase, rather than trying to retrofit it later?
As far as I understand the two areas, if you think about design phase, it's I think it's based on standard process. So you start from scratch. You can really build everything, often very modular today. So because it's standardized, it's you can reduce failure. You can increase the quality. You don't make mistakes if you'd like to use standards. And this is also something we are very focused on. We really believe that a door solution doesn't have to be, even if it's a high security door, it doesn't have to be a very complicated solution. It can be a standard, and it's defined once, and then it can be built every time in the same way. And this is the difference to I think to the retrofit situation, because the retrofit situation is not it's not a greenfield, it's a brownfield situation. And you obviously need to adapt to the existing scenario and solution, and at the same time you clearly need to define where you'd like to go to. What is the change? It's a change process in that sense, and this is really the difference to the design situation.
From your experiences, have you seen like a common misconception that you see around the physical security in data centers?
It also goes back to the topic before. I think it's a data center is a very dynamic building. I've seen this for many years in other industries, in banks, in all other also high security buildings. And you obviously, if you look at the life cycle of such a building, it's 30 years, 40, 50 years. And you really have to manage the whole life cycle of this building. And the dynamics within the data center is much higher than in any other building I've seen before. So I think you constantly need to look at the threats, the risks, and you need to come up with new answers, sometimes based on technology, sometimes based on different processes, sometimes build on maybe really some very physical change to the building itself. Everything's possible, but it has to be a constant process of improving the building, improving all the processes and everything which is related to a data center in that sense.
And this actually leads me on to my final question of the interview, which is if you could give one piece of advice to operators thinking about physical security today, what would it be?
I think it's very important that you also work together with experts who are external, because you get blind somehow if you in a building, in an industry all the time yourself, you don't get influence, new ideas, the things you need to look at you've never thought about. So I think it's very important to work together with the experts. It's really important to also to have these audits, because they give you really an information about the gaps and maybe new threats. I mean, new threats, they also come with new technology and maybe AI. We talk about AI a lot in the data center, obviously, to improve the management of data center. Also, if it comes to predictive maintenance, everything in that sense. But we shouldn't underestimate that also the risk is also using AI. And so I think it's a constant kind of battle going on. And I think that's something, it's important. And I think you really need to get people from external consultancies and manufacturers to really to be on the latest level of technology and solutions.
Thank you so much for chatting to me. I've learned an awful lot, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.